everybody. Welcome to Breaking the Rules. My name is Casey Dempster, and I'm here with my co-host, Ray Lowe, and our guest, Will Becker, who's got some great things to say, in my humble opinion. But Breaking the Rules is a show about change, and it's about transition in people's lives. And oftentimes, change is uncomfortable for people, and we believe that if you feel that you can control the change, then perhaps it will be less uncomfortable for you. You know, just because things have always been done a certain way doesn't mean you have to continue doing them that way. So I have our quote for the week, and it is from a gentleman, and I apologize in advance for mispronunciation, Albert Szent-Györgyi. And he says, discovery consists of looking at the same thing as everyone else and thinking something different. And that's kind of what we're trying to do here is, you know, yes, there's rules that apply, but maybe they don't have to apply to you. So
my turn?
I think Ray has a comment and maybe even a surprise quote of his own.
No, I'm gonna hold down the quotes. I was gonna spring that on you, but I'm not gonna do that.
Oh, because I gave it away.
Yeah. So what I do want to comment on though is that this whole concept of change is what we're all about, and it's something that affects the world, and usually not positively. I mean, anytime you have to change things, people get disturbed. Mm-hmm. Now, there's ways of embracing that if you're prepared for it. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we do on our website is we have a great toolbox. It's in the form of a sequence of courses that tell you how to deal with change and tell you how to understand what the most important aspects of that are. And change, the toolbox works no matter what causes the change or where the changes occur in your life. So for example, sometimes the changes are within us. We get tired of the way things are going and we want to make a change, right? Excitement, right? Sometimes the changes come from outside. We get downsized. Not so exciting, okay? Right. And now we have to deal with things in a different way. Sometimes the changes occur early in our life, sometimes in the middle of our life, and sometimes, you know, when we're thinking about retirement or we're thinking about we are retired and we want to change things. So the whole concept here is there's a series of tools in there that help you change. And they're all based, if you do them right, on who you are. Because as we're going to find out, trying to be somebody you're not sometimes causes more stress and anxiety than everything else that goes on.
Right, and I think it's not necessarily that you need to change who you are, but it's to help you deal with that transition and make the transition more easy and comfortable for you.
So we have a perfect example of that today. Yes. So Will Becker, and Will has gone through a sequence of changes recently, not all imposed by himself, right? So why don't you go back a little bit, talk about who you are, talk about your family a little bit, and then talk a little bit about what this event was that occurred and what issues it caused in your life.
Well, thank you. So about 2.5 years ago, I was in the middle of a wonderful career. I was a leader in the insurance industry. I was in technology. I got to lead interesting people, solve problems, and it was just really loving the experience. But I could see at the time that the company was changing, and so I have a family of 2 younger children, middle school and younger, but we're comfortable. But I could see the company was changing, and organizationally they wanted to move in a different direction. And so that's what happened about a year and a half ago. Coming out of that was I had about a year view of seeing the world was changing around me, things to you describe, Ray and Casey, as external, and wanted to be a little bit more prepared. But at the same time, I knew this is where I wanted to be, you know, comfortably. I wanted to be a leader. I wanted to lead people. At least that's so I thought. And so I got the news about a year and a half ago that I was to be let go from the company I was at. I had been with 12, 13 years. I'd been in the industry for 18 years and just really enjoyed it. And now I'd taken a step back and I was like, well, now what? You know, I wasn't scared at the moment, but I necessarily wasn't quite sure how to go forward and what I wanted to do, because I had an interesting opportunity. I'm in my mid-40s, and so I'm not quite near the end and trying to short-term goals, more still a long-term goal of what I wanted to be going forward. at my pace.
Right, and your employer provided some exit things for you, didn't they? Did they have
Yes.
counseling and career counseling and things like that?
Yes, and that was a nice benefit. So they, beyond just severance and allowing me to take time to figure out what I wanted to do as my next step, but they also gave me career coaching. It was about 6-8 months of time to understand who I was and meet people and network, realizing that when you're invested in a company for so many years, your networking gets very small if you're internal to the infrastructure of the company.
Right.
And so to get stood up in a new world of engagement and finding career opportunity was different than it was when I started this journey 12, 18 years ago when I was going through these transitions. So I had to relearn not just how to do it, but who I was and who do I want to be going forward. And it sounds almost silly back to like, what do you want to be when you grow up? But now I'm in my 40s and I still have 20 years to go, 25 years. I have to re-ask myself the same simple question.
Right, and sometimes when you're in your 20s, you think you want to be something, and it turns out that it's not a good fit.
Correct.
So I don't think it's silly to be re-examining that question when you're in your 40s. I think it's really important.
Yeah.
So I still want to be a fireman.
I thought you wanted to be an engineer and drive the train.
But that too. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about the situation you just described is not unique to you. It happens to a lot of people today. Right. I mean, lots of companies change direction, and although they kind of think about their employees, they really don't. They're thinking about their stockholders and where they have to go. So all of a sudden you're faced with this change. Now, what are the big things that you noticed, or let me phrase it a different way. What did you think you want and then found out maybe you didn't want?
Yeah, so it's interesting as we go through our lives, and especially if you're long-term, what I found was that you get accustomed to the comforts of not just the job, but the pay, the benefits, the value you bring to a company. Mm-hmm. And so as I look forward, I thought my next step would be to continue in the leadership level that I was at. Mm-hmm. And that was a comfort level, not just monetarily, but it also was a comfort in respect and value you bring decision making. And so I thought, as I started pursuing my next opportunity, when I reached out, that I was focused on that type of title and position going forward for another company. And what I initially started to feel was, well, those are smaller type of opportunities, mm-hmm. not as many at those levels. So you had to bring something unique to the interview. And what I found possibly was happening early on, and I did recognize this, but it came clear a little bit later, was that maybe that was too narrow of a scope. That mm-hmm. maybe I was trying to define myself as the title I was fulfilling and not the person I was and I wanted to bring to the company employer going forward. Right. And that's really the first challenge I faced during this process.
Right. And you also, I'm sorry, Ray, but you also mentioned to us in our conversation last week that you recognized that you didn't want to be two different people. You didn't want to be work will and home will.
Correct. And that's, it's an interesting, because I don't think many take a moment to pause and realize that we have different personas, and some environments demand it to be different people, but that wasn't for me. What I wanted to be, and which I found over the course of your program, which was the success, what makes you happy is being yourself and mm-hmm. finding the engagement that allows you to succeed, right? It's one less stress in your life to worry about. Right. And you're correct. I used to go in thinking, well, here's the work will and here's the home will. And I found that as I started looking in the opportunities were out there, that I didn't like the work will that I was applying for in mm-hmm. those positions. It demanded something that wasn't comfortable for me for the majority of the time I was going to be spending during a week. And it just was an uncomfortable situation that maybe when I was in the role, I couldn't afford to take a leap forward. But now that I had an opportunity to choose a path forward, I could take that risk.
Right.
Well, that's a really good thought, because here all of a sudden a potential negative opportunity becomes a positive, because maybe you can be anything you want, and maybe you can be a kid in the candy store,
will.
right? Yeah. The whole will. Okay, so I think this happens to a lot of people. So typically what happens is you've got this set of rules that you're trying to aspire to. Maybe rules is the wrong word here, but it's standards or whatever it is. And it's what you think you want. And so you change when you go into a job interview, because what you're trying to do is be the Will that they want you to be. Is that kind of what we're
That's
saying?
very accurate. I mean, that's what I found as I was interviewing for the job on the paper, and maybe what they body language would show, their style, the environment would dictate. And I found that it was very scripted, even though that wasn't probably what they were looking for, but it felt like I was prescribing myself to that type of result in the interview process. I wanted to display what they wanted, not necessarily what I was able to provide them, and allow them to make a choice off of that.
And
what
there's
I
this,
provide them.
this dichotomy going on in your head, right? Because one, you need the job, right? So, I mean, income does come into play here, whether you like it or not. And it does force you, it puts constraints on you, okay? And yet, it may not be where you want to go, and it may not be where you should go in the end. So, what are some of the ways that you've fought this or changed? So, how many interviews did you have in this process of going through things, approximately?
So, overall, I had about 4 on-site interviews, probably about a dozen phone screens, conversations with people to see if I would be a good fit. And in there, what I found was some of them were just, to your point, right, of just, I need to start the process of potentially having, salary again.
Yeah.
And that was a concern. The time was becoming more of a factor why I was taking interviews. And in that process, I ended up getting 4 on-sites. So 3 of them I did end up getting all the way to an offer stage. And 2 of them, I actually luckily got an opportunity to,
Choose.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I actually had the dichotomy of being able to say, it's not about me or them wanting me, it's me wanting which employer I wanted to go with. So,
Right.
but it was an interesting process because I think early in the phase, it was, to me, was I want to get this ideal position, which I didn't really believe was the ideal position, as I learned, versus the end, as I was getting later, which is now I really need a job because I'm going to stop earning, severance at that point and all that.
Right. Well, I'm sorry, we have to go to a break.
Again.
I do this to him every week.
We're always broken.
So we're going to go for a brief commercial break. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Shelter dogs aren't broken. They've simply experienced more life. If they were human, we would call them wise. They would be the ones with tales to tell and stories to write. The ones dealt a bad hand who responded with courage. Do not pity a shelter dog. Adopt one.
Say we've got grit, and we'll take it as a compliment. Because it's our uncommon drive, our spark within, that brings us together and sets us apart. We are temple made. And when others take shortcuts, when others take breaks, when others take the easy way, we take charge.
I work 13 hours a day, 6 days a week. So when I'm off the clock, I gotta get stuff done. So when I need a snack, I need something healthy, tasty, and easy to eat. Like wonderful pistachios without the shells. They're protein-powered, delicious, and great on the go. And that's perfect for me. Thanks, Liz. A woman without a lot of time.
Whether you're a gourmet cook or just want to eat like one, visit Rostelli Market Fresh, your home for the freshest, locally sourced ingredients to please everyone who loves great food. Our organic meats, quality seafood, and free-range poultry are cut fresh to order. Chefs create culinary-inspired prep foods made fresh every day, which pair nicely with our vast selection of fine wines and spirits. Choose from handmade pastas, artisan cheeses, organic produce, and grocery items, all from the finest purveyors. Rostelli Market Fresh. From our
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Casey Dempster with my co-host Ray Lowe and our guest Will Becker. This is Breaking the Rules, and we're going to get back to what Will was talking about. He had been downsized out of a job and had some revealing experiences during the interview process, but you were still feeling frustrated by the time we met you. And a neighbor of yours introduced you to us and thought that our program, The Luckiest Guy in the World, could be helpful to you. So, I think that you told us that at that point you were pretty at a low point and that you were willing to try anything.
Sure, yeah. It's exactly how it happened. I mean, what was really for me was, why couldn't I get more interviews? I felt I had the experience for other opportunities I was applying for, but something was not resonating between my expectation and the results that I was seeing. And so it was introduced to me, The Luckiest Guy in the World, as a program, and it was intriguing.
Right. And so you started to take our online courses. And for the audience, the first section of courses is designed to teach you who you truly are through some assessments. And so that's where we started you.
Sure, yeah.
And so talk a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, and it was interesting because it was a different series of exercises that I have done in my previous career, and companies will do those, but this was totally different. And I went through with excitement to go look and see if I could learn something different about myself, and it came back, and it was very helpful. It was a helpful process to not understand my strengths, but where my opportunities were. So as I went forward and engaged myself to looking at job descriptions or meeting people or networking or describing myself, I could emphasize based on those results, and correlate to what I was hearing as the opportunities. Are they a fit for me, or would I be a fit for them? So that was a good process to go down for me. But at the same time, it was revealing some of what I knew already, but at the same time, it did give me a little bit of insight and a different perspective.
So you changed the rules. You stopped interviewing for a job and started interviewing companies that fit you, in a sense, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if it didn't feel right to what I had learned early on in the process.
So let's go back. One of the things that we have in our courses that's a key point here is something called unique ability. And I think you found out pretty early, or once you really got into it, what your unique ability really is. So what is your unique ability, and how did you find it out?
So my unique ability is to be able to simplify complex ideas and problems for others. And it didn't resonate with me right away on my own. I needed the unique ability awareness tool set that helped me do that. And it was a straightforward exercise, which was you had recommended reaching out to 5 to 10 people that I knew, professionally, friendship, family, to say a simple question: please tell me what they saw as my unique ability. One, what did they find most unique about me? And it was interesting, and as I got responses back, 4 of them came back to the same topic, which is what I described. You explain complex issues for others to understand so we could do our job better. And that was eye-opening to me, because that's exactly how I felt, but I didn't know how to convey it, and I didn't recognize it until somebody else looking in at me was able to share that directly.
Isn't it amazing? Everybody else knows who you are except you, right?
Yeah.
And I think we're all that way. And I think, what this does is it gives you permission to be yourself and to open up. Now, you took that then and went back to your job interviews, and give us a sense of, how one of them went where you used this.
Yeah. So one of the interviews I went into was interesting. It was a panel. It was 3 people at once. And when I went into the meeting, I knew the industry, but that was comfortable. I knew what the role was, but it was a lower level position. But when I went in, I wasn't trying to interview for something that this position was not. I interviewed as myself. And so when I went in, they would ask me a question: so do you know this process? And I would say, sure, I know that process, and I'd explain it. And then the next question would come up to describe another challenge, some more of the general, typical interview questions, and I would explain a problem, and I would use it from, let me break down a complex answer into simple description. And it just led to a good hour-and-a-half conversation, and it did not feel like an interview. It felt like we were out to lunch, having a conversation, even though we're sitting in a boardroom, formal in suit and tie. It really broke down the engagement to be a very natural engagement. So it was Will Becker talking to 3 interviewers as a person.
Right.
This is what it would feel like if we were working together, as opposed to a scripted, well, I'm going to ask you these series of questions to get this type of insight to who you are as a person.
Right.
And it led to a much more positive interview process. And the nice piece is, in a sense, I got to interview the company back. I was understanding, well, these are the people I'm going to work with directly. Do they work with me well through this process? And do they appreciate what I'm bringing to the potential employer?
Right, because you want to feel that what you bring to the table is valued.
Right.
And so that's very important.
Okay, so you went in here. Now, you finally, I think, got to the point where you had 2 job offers, right?
Right.
That were meaningful to you.
Yes.
All right. And how did you pick the one you wanted?
So it was interesting because the one opportunity was to lead change, and it was more aligned to what I used to be doing, but the environment didn't seem welcoming to engagement and having a natural flow of discussion, hearing ideas out, taking complex things, breaking down to simple solutions, and then proposing a way to deliver it. Where the other felt more appreciative of the background and experience and saying, this is what we want. We want you to come in, and while your job title is A, and this is what you're going to do, we really want you to help us groom our whole company, our whole office, to understand insurance better, to understand process better, to understand what the experience is from a client and agent, the people that live and work in this industry, because that's what you can bring. And that helped me come back and say, well, I want to go to the area that's going to align to my interests more than necessarily a position that was prescribed to certain expectations that didn't quite meet what my day in and day out routine felt was a natural experience. So that's what really drove it, was the ability to be welcome in, to take what we were doing in our interview process and apply it to my daily activities.
And now you're in the midst of this, right? And we understand you just got promoted. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you look at this, how often do you go back to your unique ability now and say, I need to address this problem maybe a little differently than I might traditionally have done?
Yeah, I would say it's, I challenge myself daily to that. It's almost like a mantra. But I would say, every few weeks I have to remind myself, I have a series of clients, and they're customers to me. They don't know me, and I may have to bring to them a solution that I have to feel confident in, but at the same time bring it down to a level that's explainable so they can make the decision. And that's very different than the experience I had when I was employed previously. I was on the other end of that experience.
Right.
I was the carrier side, which meant we drove the decision. Here I'm now offering options to the client so they can make a decision, so then I can come back and champion on their behalf to the development team, the technical teams in my office, to say this is how they want it. And so it feels almost daily. I have to remind myself as a client and a partner to a client that that's my role. My role is
Okay.
to give them options to pick a solution that's going to be a long-term.
You really have that down,
Still.
by the way. It just
Yeah.
keeps resonating every time. So can we go back a little bit? So let's go back to the old well, when you were in the old job, okay, and you were happy.
Yeah.
And yet you weren't necessarily doing all the things that you're doing now. So where's the disconnect? Is this what happens to people? We get into a role and we're not unhappy, and can you just...
I think it's perspective, right? So we become insulated many times, at least I felt that way. So I love the company. I still root for the company I was with for all those years. I contributed to the company. But at the same time, you only see what you see daily. And so when I was able to step out, now I see different perspectives and I appreciate different viewpoints. And maybe at that time, I was happy within what I know.
Right.
And so when I stepped out and I took the Luckiest Guy in the World courses, I learned more about myself. And when I went to apply it, I saw other people's reacted to it. And then I started feeling that I was learning about myself again every day, almost like I was coming out of college again. The world was green, right? And
Yeah.
you just don't know what you want to do and feel that excitement again. Well, now I'm in my mid-40s and I was enjoying that whole experience again. And it's just perspective. And I said, once I got out there, and I'll use you mentioned earlier about this career coaching. It was awkward for other people to hear me so open about, here's who I want to be and this is the type of job I'm looking for. They struggled to help me because they were so prescribed to, but I don't know what you do. And I said, I'm not trying to find a position that tells me what I do. I wanted a job that fits who I am. And they're just different balances on the scale for me. And so I leaned heavily to that perspective. And that was really my new happiness, right? I mean, that's really where I went to your question. Well, I was happy, but did I feel happy? I did, but it was insulated. Now I'm out there, and it's a totally different experience, and it's a wonderful experience.
You know, one of the things that tends to happen that we notice all the time is that, you know, most people in a job, if you're really unhappy with your job, it's easy, you quit, right? Sooner or later, you quit. If you're really happy with your job, it's great too, okay? But most of us are in that mid-range where, you know, we're not unhappy, we're not totally happy, and we don't make changes because of that. And sometimes, one of the disguised benefits of getting laid off is that you get to reinvent yourself all over again. And you know, you keep coming back to you're in the mid-40s. You're not in your mid-40s, you're at the beginning of your lifespan, and you've got as many years as you want going forward. And as long as you're happy doing what you want, life is pretty good, right?
Yeah.
So do you have any advice that you would give to people, either that are employed like you were or downsized, as to what to do?
So I'll say, in Casey and Ray, one of the best opportunities I have is to pay it forward. It sounds cliche in some ways, but what you've taught me is it's a simplicity. It's a simple question. What's your unique skill? And as I've met others who I used to work with for many years who are going through this change over the past year and a half, they've been let go and they've been struggling with this new opportunity. They're like me in life and in some ways where they are in their lives. And so when they look forward, I've been passing it forward. Ask yourself, ask others to tell you what is your unique skill set.
Right.
And you know, that's the one takeaway. And the value there is it's a simple question anybody can ask themselves, and they can have this over lunch with any friend they have or any family member, and they'll get real honest feedback because it's not a job interview.
Right.
It's conversation.
Right.
And when people are there, and I've found, is that when people have heard that me ask them that question, they pause and it helps them calm down in the moment of change, right? They're scared a little bit, maybe stressed a little bit, nervous. And when I ask that question, it kind of refocused them for a few minutes, maybe a few days, just to start thinking about themselves a little bit. And then I just leave them with that. And hopefully that's something they can help themselves find a new opportunity going forward. But you've given me that ability to feel confident to share that little nugget of advice.
That's great.
It's a simple intro back into helping others.
I think we're out of a job. I think Will's going to take over.
Well, we're also out of time.
Okay, that's usually what happens. So thanks so much for being here today, and thanks for sharing your experience, because sometimes it's tough to share that, and we really appreciate that. And hopefully some other people will pick up this concept of figure out who you really are and don't be afraid to be who you are.
Exactly, and thank you so much for joining us today. Tune in next week on Tuesday at 10 a.m. for Breaking the Rules, and we'll have another exciting, interesting, and wonderful guest.
Great. Thanks so much.